Welcome back to Screenfish Radio. It is 2024, and I am so thrilled to be here with you. The holidays are over, but I'm not just excited for that. I'm excited because this is one of my favorite episodes of the year. It truly is. Not just because of what we're talking about, but because I love having Kevin McLenithan on as well. Welcome back, Kevin. It's great to have you here.
It's really good to be back on Screenfish, Steve. Thanks for having me back. I guess the fact that you keep asking me back to do this episode means that something's going right.
It's true. The people demand it. I mean, the
Right.
people demand it. No, I'm thrilled. Honestly, Kevin, I really look forward to this episode because it's so unique. This week, we are going to talk about one of the more underwritten surprises of the year in some ways, the zone of interest. But before we do that, it's time for us to get into a bit of an annual tradition. And Kevin, I'd like to, if we can, talk a little bit about our favorite movie moments. This is one of the things I love about this particular episode because everybody does top 10 lists. Everybody does their best films of the year, but that doesn't always mean that those are the only moments that matter or that land. Sometimes there are films that are not that great, that have important moments, and sometimes it is from those biggest Oscar films that are coming out of the year. But I would love to talk before we talk about our top three. Do you have any honorable mentions you'd like to throw in?
Yeah. So cards on the table. I think 2023 was a fabulous movie year. And I'm not just saying that. Like, for instance, 2022, I actually was a little bit disappointed in. So I don't just throw out the great year for movies compliment willy nilly. But I think that's definitely true for 2023. And that means that I could probably have like 10 honorable mentions here. But um, I guess there are a couple that I'd want to mention. One of them is kind of the ending of Oppenheimer,
Mm.
where without giving away everything that happens in the ending, there is kind of it closes with a kind of ominous, almost dire apocalyptic vision where Oppenheimer sort of comes to terms with the Pandora's box that he's opened. And the note that Nolan ends the movie on is profoundly disquieting, I think, as it should be for a movie about the father of the atomic bomb. And uh, I just remember walking out of the film, uh, having seen that ending, just feeling kind of haunted by it.
Mm.
And I think that's exactly right and fitting. Um, and it also just makes for a fitting capstone to a very ambitious film as well. And I loved that moment. It's a strong ending to a strong film. I also really liked a sequence from Wes Anderson's Asteroid City, where which is just it's hard to even explain exactly what the context for this scene is, just because it's in Wes Anderson movie, so it's like a nesting doll of narratives within narratives and characters playing other characters. But the short version is there is a play within a play, or a play within the movie, or maybe no, I'm getting mixed up myself. It's a play within a radio drama within the movie. So it's got that nesting doll structure. But in this play within the movie, one actor kind of opens up to a director character and says that he doesn't quite understand the play that he's in. He doesn't understand what makes his character tick. He's not sure why he's even doing this play. And the director just kind of tells him, that's okay. You just have to keep muddling through and just keep playing the part, and it will become clear in time.
Mm.
And again, maybe it doesn't, out of context, maybe it doesn't sound like all that much, but in the context of the film, it just felt like such a balm to anyone who's ever felt unsure about their life's direction or about the direction of just kind of the world in general and not being sure, what it's all for. Why are we here? why is the world the way it is? And the answer kind of, I don't know, seems like an echo maybe of what God might tell us, is that you don't necessarily have to understand it, but you do have to be faithful and play your part. And I don't know, there's something about that that just felt so profoundly healing, especially in a year like 2023. So that was one of my honorable mentions. So we're going up from there. So that maybe gives you such a good idea of what a strong year I think it was, that those two heavy hitters are just in my honorable mentions.
Well, those are great moments, absolutely. And it's funny because one of my honorable mentions is also from Oppenheimer, and but my the scene that I was looking at honestly is the bomb itself. The not the scene where they actually test the bomb. I found astounding because of how they could have done it, and then as opposed to how they did do it. Because what they could have done, in all seriousness, is made it look really cool. They could have taken the easy route, shown you the bomb and the devastation, and had everyone go, "Whoa!" Something really simple. But this is actually a very quiet and sad scene as it plays out. It really is remarkable. And the way that he uses his practical effects and the different ways that he does to create the imagery there, this really settles into the devastation and how the world has changed, as opposed to any mind-blowing cool effect. Like, this is the same director, of course, as we know, who felt like crashing a plane in Tenet, and he did. And he actually, in the way he uses his cinematography in this particular moment, is astounding to me, because how I would have expected him to do it. It was so much more complex. I thought, very much so. And the other thing I would say, and I don't, we're going to talk about this film, but the zone of interest, and I feel a little dirty saying this to you, Kevin, that in my honorable mentions is a scene about vomit. But it really is. For those of you who have seen the film, it really is a remarkable moment and sort of the climax of the film, which we will talk about later, in the way that this relationship that Rudolph has with his job. And it's, in some ways, my two honorable mentions are disquieting. They're scenes that are meant to be unsettling, rather than simply that we would accept the way things are in both films. And I was fascinated by that. It's an exclamation point on the film that we're going to talk about later. And these are, again, honorable mentions. Like, I agree with you. This was a great year in film. There was a lot of great stuff, up and down. So top movie moments are, I mean, they're in some ways tough to pick, but let's give it a try. What's your number 3 movie moment of 2023?
Yeah, so uh I'm a sucker for a movie that throws down the gauntlet with an opening sequence. There's something about a film that is just so confident in its own craft that is going to sort of announce its own greatness with its opening sequence, and then completely back it up with something that just uh, blows your socks off. And that kind of moment is found with the opening sequence of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Um, like the entire opening sequence is, fantastic. It follows, Spider Gwen rather than Miles Morales to start with. And the way that the film picks kind of this watercolor impressionistic visual scheme for Gwen's prologue is just jaw-droppingly gorgeous. Like, it's just gorgeous to look at. Best, probably my favorite animation of any film that came out this year. And this is a year that also saw a Miyazaki movie come out. So
Yeah.
that's, stiff competition there, but it's gorgeous to look at. But the sequence that throws down the gauntlet, so to speak, is uh towards the end of this prologue. Spider-Gwen is drawn into a fight at the Guggenheim with an alternate universe version of the Vulture, and some alternate universe spider people come to her rescue. And just everything about it is thrilling. The way the music and the editing and imagery all harmonize to make something that's so propulsive and hilarious and exciting all at once. I mean, I have to give it up. It cannot be denied. It's a great sequence, and it's the sort of sequence that I would dearly love to see more of in comic book movies in general. Just how it doesn't it's it just has everything you could possibly want out of a popcorn movie sequence. It's funny, thrilling, exciting, deeply emotional, and it sets up all of the dominoes for the rest of the film. I mean, what more could you want?
It is a staggering scene. Honestly, I remember seeing that in theaters and just being astounded at the level of visual detail and stylistic impressions across the board in that simple scene. It is nothing short of remarkable. And I, it almost, it's funny. I remember when the first film came out, thinking to myself, this is a very impressive achievement in terms of the way that they tap into the comic book style and the way that they film the thing. But you're absolutely right. Like everything about this is just remarkable, and the film works. It really works, and that scene is just a perfect opening, just phenomenal. Um, that is a great pick for number three. I am very impressed.
I mean, we were talking about this before the episode aired, but there are occasions where I will just fire up Netflix just to watch the first 20 minutes of
Yeah.
Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, just because I can't get enough of that opening sequence. And that, I think, has to be the mark of a great movie moment, that you just want to return to that moment over and over and over, regardless of whether you watch the movie in its entirety afterwards.
Well, with that in mind, I have some movie moments this year that honestly I did not expect to put in my top three, but one of them is actually from a film that shocked me with its emotion and its thematic resonance, and it's just a strong character work, and it's Godzilla minus one. I
Mhm.
I have you seen it?
It is. I can't say that I'm a Godzilla fan, not because I don't like Godzilla, but just because like I'm not the sort of person who's like there on opening day to see Godzilla. That said, I do really like the original Godzilla, and I've heard wonderful things about this new one.
I'm the same as you. I went with a friend of mine who is obsessed with Godzilla. We went a couple of weeks into it, and I've seen other Godzilla films, and this was like nothing I'd seen before because this is a very deep film about PTSD and about dealing with trauma and about trying to put the pieces back together. It's set immediately following the events of World War II in Japan. Japan is recovering from the effects of the bomb, and tells the story of a kamikaze pilot who did not fulfill his mission. And Godzilla, the beast, becomes this metaphor for his trauma and his PTSD. Yes, it has the Godzilla tropes. It has him stomping through a city, just laying waste to everything. But there this scene in particular where they're on a ship. They're on a ship, and Godzilla is approaching the ship, and his head is just briefly out of the water. And I'm telling you, it is far more emotional than it should be. And maybe should be is the wrong, but I expected it to be, is what I mean. It's the Godzilla becomes a metaphor for his feelings of loss, and he's constantly on the move. And the film, to my understanding, has a budget of roughly $13 million in terms of special effects, and it looks phenomenal. Like, just the best special effects of the year, without question, for less than some actors got paid, get paid in a Hollywood set. It is a really genuine surprise. And the film itself might actually squeak into my top 10 films, but this moment really leaves a mark.
I mean, I do feel like the best Godzilla movies aren't just about watching a giant lizard level a civilization, right? Like there's this resonance that he has in the best Godzilla movies that um goes beyond just what he literally is. So it sounds like this new one is of a piece with that tradition.
It really is. And you know that's what is it's funny because I came out of the theater and I immediately turned to my friend and I said, I do not want Godzilla -2. Like, this is a great film. I don't need it to become the Godzilla minus franchise, because it works. And the fact that they would land it and set it post World War II has a much deeper resonance than most of these other Godzilla films that just take place in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and what have you, because they're grounding it in genuine history, and it becomes almost a self reflection. It's a genuine surprise for me. What's your number two?
Well, so we've gone with the blockbusters for those first two picks. I'm going to go to something much more human sized for my number two. I really liked Sofia Coppola's movie Priscilla from close to the end of 2023. This is a movie that is focused on the story of the woman who married Elvis. She meets him in high school and is sort of swept off her feet by him. He takes her back to from where she lives, stationed on a military base in Europe. He sweeps her off her feet, takes her back to Graceland, marries her, and they lead a life of sorts together. And I think Coppola is very good and very perceptive about how um, people, often women, find themselves um, in social contexts and under social pressures that are stifling to them, and that they have to kind of find a way towards some sort of meaning or self-actualization within that context. So this movie fits very neatly into that tradition for her filmography. But my favorite moment from the film is, and it's a very sober film. Like, there are so many shots of Priscilla while Elvis is kind of off attending to his empire elsewhere in the country and sort of hobnobbing with starlets and kind of being the king that we all have heard of and know about. There are all these shots that Coppola give us of Priscilla back at Graceland in this big empty house all by herself, just sort of wandering from room to room aimlessly, not quite knowing what to do with herself. And the film is very clear-eyed about kind of the cost of marrying into sort of this dream life, and sort of what's the cost of when dream butts up against reality. Very sober-minded. But the moment that I love the most from the film is actually an ecstatic moment where Priscilla and Elvis are still kind of flush in their in the fairy tale phase of their relationship. And we kind of see Priscilla morph from the high school girl whom Elvis grooms. I mean, there's no other word for it. He is much older than her, and she is much too young to be making a decision to go live with him. Um, but the film is very honest and clear-eyed also about how that would be very exciting for somebody as young as this. And there's a montage where we see Priscilla kind of go from being that high school girl to being Priscilla Presley and the signature look that she cultivated, the beehive hairdo, the eyeshadow, all of that is set to a Dan Deacon song, which was gratifying to me personally, just because I love Dan Deacon. But the whole thing is just so ecstatic and really carries through the excitement of her interstate at that time, and it climaxes with a fireworks show that is just it's just a wonderful and thrilling example of how music and montage can work together to bring you into an emotional state where, even though you know how Priscilla Presley's life isn't going to be a bed of roses after this, you can understand what was attractive to her about it in the beginning. And I think that's Coppola being very clear-eyed about the totality of her character's life rather than just, cherry picking details from it. So I don't know. I love that sequence. It's again very thrilling, like my previous one, but it's a much more human sized kind of thrill. So I like it quite a bit.
Now, that was one that I did miss. I'm looking forward to trying to check that one out because I do love Sofia Coppola. I love her work. I always have. There's always a humanity to her characters that breaks through, and I was looking forward to this one because, especially coming after last year's Elvis, which was, so wild and, over the top in so many ways, to for Sofia Coppola to take a crack at this story and from Priscilla's perspective was really intriguing to me. So I do want to check that one out.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Baz Luhrmann Elvis, because not being a huge Baz Luhrmann fan, I was really gratified to see Sofia Coppola sort of like say, okay, wait a minute, I'm going to puncture this grand fantasia that you've constructed, because this is going to be through the eyes of his wife, who sort of didn't get to live the fantasy that he got to. I know it's a wonderful film, and I hope lots of people get a chance to see it.
And actually, in many ways, it serves as a great alternate view of that story because she doesn't have much of a voice in the Baz Luhrmann film. It's really about him and Colonel Parker. So to have the opportunity to see that story from another side, I think is phenomenal. I'm looking forward to seeing that. So
Yeah, it's a good one. I'm interested to know your thoughts once you do get around to it. But you've got your own little I don't know. I feel like your second pick is also kind of a kindred spirit, maybe, for with Priscilla in some ways.
it might be. I went the opposite way in terms of humanness, if you will. I can't shake Barbie. I'm not a Barbie head. I as a child I played with Barbies. My sister had Barbies. My friends who were girls had Barbies, but I absolutely adore Greta Gerwig's Barbie. I know it's not subtle and it is wild, but it's so very funny. And there is this one particular moment which I truly think is one of the moments of this year that got the most people talking in the best of ways. America Ferrera plays the owner of a Barbie, and the film is in some ways trying to explain the Barbie human relationship based on this film is just too complicated to do so. But she's sitting there in Barbie world, and she goes on about a 2-minute speech about the complexities of femininity in the modern era, and she says things like, you have to be pretty but not too pretty, you have to be smart but not too, you have to be but confident but not too strong, and all of these contradictions that modern women must are trying to navigate in the current world. And I will honestly say, not only did I think it was a fantastic moment, a fantastic performance in that speech, it's also one of the moments that I honestly felt most people spoke to me about. If they spoke about something this year, a moment for them, it seemed to be about this speech in this film. And I really think it was something special, and really sort of drives the point home over the overall film. Gerwig did an absolutely remarkable job with a film that on paper did not seem like it was going to work, but does so beautifully.
I mean, 2023 in some ways was kind of the year of Barbie, wasn't it? Like everybody, it kind of took you back to the halcyon days before the MCU when like the movie, like everybody was talking about the same movie and it didn't involve superheroes.
Yeah.
Like that was very refreshing. And you're right that it's Gerwig was kind of faced with an almost impossible task to make a decent movie about Barbie. I'm gonna have to confess that I wasn't as high on it as a lot of people were, but it was nice to kind of see just everybody sort of come together and just being interested in the
Yeah.
movie. And that was it was nice. It was like a kind of a culture-wide event that didn't revolve around action or punching or explosions. Like that was just nice. And it does have like it has its heart in the right place and it has lots of ideas on its mind. And man, just thank goodness that those kinds of movies can still be the monster hits that Barbie was.
It absolutely was refreshing. I like that the use of that term because it just felt different. It just felt different. It was nice to have a cultural moment where we weren't worried about what supervillain and what timeline we were on. It was just sort of like, here we are. This is a film which I felt like really worked. And I mean, I'm not even talking about like I'm Just Ken, which was the another major thing to come out of this was Ken's story. But no, I really appreciated this thing, and it certainly left its mark. So um, it was something I had to mention. Now, but before we get to our number one, Kevin, I think we have some clips from some of our other friends, Screenfish's other friends, tell us their favorite movie moment of the year. So let's go to them first.
Hi, I'm Brianna from the Tarot Group, and my magical movie moment from 2023 is maybe a little unorthodox, but it's actually when I went to see Cocaine Bear in theaters, of all things. I wasn't really sure what to expect that from that movie. Obviously, Elizabeth Banks is the director, so you expect it to be funny, but there's just nothing like sitting in a movie theater, hearing people scream, and then hearing people laugh, and I just died laughing throughout the whole movie, and it was just a fun, amazing energy in that theater, and that's really my favorite thing about movies. I love watching them as a community with other people in the movie theater and just feeling the energy of everyone else around me, no matter what the movie is. So yeah, that's my favorite. You should check it out if you haven't seen it. It's a wild ride.
Hey there, Screenfish. Ali Lamershedden here, Route 504 PR. You asked me for my favorite movie moment of 2023, and frankly, it was a pretty easy choice. My favorite movie moment came right at the end of 2023 with Zac Efron doing inverted sit-ups in The Iron Claw. It was a cinematic masterpiece, if I say so myself. No one has ever been so buff for a role. Anyways, thanks for asking.
Chris Utley here with my biggest moments in cinema in 2023. Number one is definitely the epic monologue from Barbie. America Ferrera's performance in The Words That Were Written said it all. And number two, I think, would be Christopher Nolan getting us to spend 3 hours in a big old IMAX auditorium watching people talk with probably 2 minutes of bomb footage in Oppenheimer. That's what I got. Thank you.
Hey everyone, it's Julie Levac. Oh my goodness, I can't believe that it's 2024 already. But in terms of my favorite movie moments of 2023, I keep thinking back to this one moment, which is going to get a bit heavy, so I apologize in advance. But I saw the Mr. Dressup documentary in September at TIFF, And obviously, it was very nostalgic and it was absolutely incredible. But I saw this documentary on the 1 year anniversary of my mother's death. And there was a scene in the Mr. Dressup documentary that was about how Ernie Coombs' wife died. And it was, she died in a very tragic way. And I had no idea. When this happened, I was still a kid and I didn't know. And I was very shocked to hear that this happened. But what really touched me was how Ernie came back and continued on with his show. And I remember a clip of him going on the Fred Penner show. And if I'm not mistaken, it was the first time he had come back to the screen after his wife passed away. And it was so tragic and so touching. And it really kind of helped me think about my own grief and, being there for my own children in the midst of that grief, as Ernie was there for all of us in the midst of his grief. So it was very, very monumental, I think, for me in that moment, on that day specifically, seeing that, learning that, and really thinking deeply about how he handled it. So that's really it. I mean, it was such a big moment in film for me in 2023. Take care.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you are in the seats with once more. It's your boy, Dave Voigt, the host and producer and editor over at In the Seats, but also at In the Seats with, your one-stop shop for all the latest movie news, entertainment reviews, and lovely conversations we have with a wide-ranging variety of entertainment industry professionals. I am obviously a friend of Screenfish and happy to participate as we talk a little bit about movie moments of the past year. And you know what? I'm gonna change gears a little bit. I'm gonna be honest with you. There isn't any sort of specific scene or movie or moment that stands out. But the reality is I suffered some personal loss this year. I lost my mother back in November to cancer. And obviously still going through all that, but it's kind of made me remember and appreciate how lucky I am to be able to get to work in the arts, in the movie industry, and talk with a wide-ranging variety of people who live their dreams. And I'm one of them. And I mean, that really is such an important thing as well, to find what works for you, find your dream and live it. And I mean, I think if there was a movie moment for me in 2023, it's that the movies is my moment. And I love every single minute of it. And I have to thank you and all my listeners and readers and all the readers and listeners for Screenfish as well for contributing to the conversation about cinema and cinema appreciation. I love y'all, and just keep watching and keep working, and we will certainly be talking more and more in 2024. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you sending in your clips, and absolutely, those are great picks. I appreciate it. So here we are. Kevin, drum roll, please. What is your number one movie moment for 2023?
Man, okay. So one of the things I loved about 2023 was there were so many kind of established masters of the filmmaking craft who came out with movies this year. You had Wes Anderson, Michael Mann, and last but certainly not least, Martin Scorsese. And all of them kind of, in some way or another, kind of made movies that felt like them in some way really honestly reckoning with something very personal to themselves, and maybe in some ways even reflecting on kind of what their place as cinematic storytellers is. And my number one movie moment of the year that I just can't stop thinking about is kind of the closing, the epilogue, I guess, to Killers of the Flower Moon, Martin Scorsese's movie about the murders that targeted the Osage people in the early 1900s, where a bunch of kind of a cabal of white men essentially got together with a scheme to marry into the Osage Nation, kill off the women who had rights to this oil-rich land, and then take those assets and that money for themselves. It's a horrifying story, very sobering. Even more sobering for the fact that for a lot of people, this is going to be the first time they'd ever even heard that sort of thing happened. So it's a story that needed to be told. Scorsese tells it very well. In the epilogue, though, he kind of makes the interesting choice to give that kind of standard, based on a true story ending where, what eventually happened to all these characters, so and so ended up here, so and so ended up here, so and so died. Like that, we're all used to seeing that at the end of a movie that's based on a historical, true to life story. Scorsese kind of frames it as this rinky dink, 1930s, 1940s radio serial drama where, the where are they now little blurbs for each of the characters that we've seen is read off by actors, and they're sort of hamming it up for the microphone. And it feels like Scorsese is very pointedly um, calling out how these sorts of atrocities and injustices are often kind of packaged very neatly for a very certain kind of audience. In our case, of a white audience, and kind of come packaged in a way that we can consume and feel, kind of good about, in the sense that, we are properly horrified by it, and that makes us kind of good people. And now that the injustice has been told and set right, we can all sort of move on with our lives. Scorsese's framing of that kind of gives the lie to that sentiment and says, no, this was a horrible thing that happened. And he puts a button on it by, at the very end, Scorsese himself comes out on camera. And he reads out the blurb about Lily Gladstone's character, Molly, who is one of the most, she faces so much over the course of the movie, and loses so much. And Scorsese himself reads it out, and he reads it with such grief on his face, and ends it just by kind of looking into the camera, just completely mournful, as if to say, I know that I'm a white guy telling an indigenous story. I know that this is just a movie, and that nothing can really undo the injustices that were perpetrated against these people. But it's the only thing I can do as a cinematic artist. And then he closes it with a final shot of the Osage themselves. And I think it's a beautiful ending, and I think it puts the emphasis where it needs to be put. It's not just a white filmmaker appropriating another story of a victimized group kind of to burnish his own street cred. It's somebody who's doing the only thing he knows how to do in response to a historical atrocity. Does it make amends? That's maybe not for a white person to say, but it is very heartfelt, sincere, and respectful. And I'm so thankful that he made it. And for a filmmaker who has made as many great movies as Scorsese has, this stands among some of his greatest. I really like this film, and it's just the perfect ending to it.
I agree with you 100%, and I will say that there was no film I dreaded more this year than Killers of the Flower Moon, because not that I, Scorsese, incredible, one of the greatest, but I was deathly afraid of the tone he was going to take with this particular film, because even unintentionally I was worried about it coming across as appropriation, and he doesn't. I don't think he does that, or at least directly. He works very hard to not, and I think that so much of the film becomes an American tragedy of this, the stealing of the American soul, um, and the damage that has been done. Like, in many ways, I don't think this was a film of like, oh no, these poor people. It was like, oh, what have we done?
Mhm.
And I think that made the film work. Like, there's an incredible film that looks at residential schools. It's a Canadian film called Bones of Crows, and it's just like, I'm going to use the word dangerous, and I mean dangerous in a good way. Like, it's just a phenomenal, phenomenal film. Indigenous filmmakers, Indigenous cast, just incredible storytelling. And with this particular one, I was actually nervous that it would try to be that. But you're absolutely right. The note that the film hits in its finale genuinely seems to move away from that. He's not trying to own anybody's story. He's trying to, amends cannot be made because of a film, but a genuine sense of owning the darkness within, which I felt worked very well.
I mean, I think that's why it feels like it's such a fitting late period film for him. You know, he's spent an entire career chronicling, you know, the various dark impulses that people can get up to, whether they're gangsters, boxers, even, you know, like priests, like all these Scorsese is better than anyone else at sort of being very unsparing about the darkness that can coexist with a conscience in the human heart. And the fact that he turns that unsparing sensibility on um on the characters in Killers of the Flower Moon. Like, he doesn't give his white audience anywhere to hide. He's like, there can be no justice when you are living in a completely unjust system. And it's a tough sit. He doesn't kind of give us a good guy that we can root for necessarily, who's going to come, like, there's no John Wayne character who comes in and puts everything right. And that, I think, is very disciplined of him to recognize and to put up on screen. Yeah, a tough sit, but a very important film, and one that I just keep thinking about all the time. So I'll be quiet about it now because I could go on and on, but it's a great film.
It's a great film. It really is. And I will say, I mean, my number one pick as well is very different type of film. And it comes from Alexander Payne's The Holdovers, which is truly one of my favorite films of the year. It is just a remarkable story. It tells the story of a teacher, a grumpy curmudgeon, if you will, of a teacher in an all boys school, played by Paul Giamatti. And the with the Christmas holidays approaching, the kids are going home, and they're teenagers. They're going home, except for a select few whose parents have decided that they're going to stay there for the holidays, and the teacher is left in charge of these young men. And eventually it goes down to just one student, him and one student and the cook, trying to get through the holidays together. I really find it some of the best performances and character work of the year. Paul Giamatti is just remarkable, as is Divine. Just incredible performances from them. And what we see is these broken pieces trying to fumble their way through life together. And actually, it's a Christmas movie that doesn't really know what to do with Christmas, and I find that fascinating as well. But there is a scene in the film's finale, without spoiling the ending per se. I did podcast on it before, but there's a scene in the film's finale when the Paul Giamatti is called into the office for a meeting, and while he is in the meeting, young Angus, who's probably about 17 years old, and Divine, who is the cook, I forget her character's name, are sitting outside, and they simply take each other's hand. No words are spoken. It's a very motherly moment. It's a very, we're going to get through this together moment, and it so symbolizes the rest of the film. It is such, no words are spoken, and yet so much is said. And it's just an incredible moment that I just, honestly, I cannot stop thinking about this just brief, one hand taking another as they await the fate of what's about to come on the outs when this meeting is over. It's just a remarkable moment. That's my number one.
The Holdovers was such a nice, I don't want to say surprise necessarily. Like I'm not surprised it was good, but it was just so, it was again one of these movies where it was just very gratifying to watch it and to see the warm reception that it got from audiences in general, just because it is kind of, in some ways, almost feels like a throwback to a certain kind of smaller adult movie from, I don't know, like the 70s or maybe even early 80s, where it was just sort of about a group of people. It's not sentimental, but it's not afraid of sentiment, if that distinction makes sense. Yeah, I don't know. I had a good time with this film also, so I'm glad to see that you liked it as well.
It surprise is not, again, I want to agree with you saying the word surprise, because I wasn't surprised that it was good. I was surprised at how I connected with it. Like it's just one of these things that you sit with, and just the moments sort of land, and everything feels personable and natural. Like there aren't, if I remember correctly, I don't think there's any wild set pieces. It's just people doing things. And the conversations that take place, and the little truths that are revealed, and the little, there aren't a lot. I mean, I guess there are some revealing moments, but it's not a film that tries to grab you. It's just it's a film that wants to sit with you. And that one moment really sort of is the climax of the film, for me. So
I got to ask, just as a sidebar, have you seen, this is another film that came out last year, Wim Wenders' Perfect Days?
I have not. I have heard good things. It was at TIFF.
Hearing you talk about what you liked about The Holdovers makes me think you'll really dig Perfect Days, because it's a similar one where it's just kind of, it's a movie that sits with you rather than trying to grab you, and it's just quiet and lovely and humanistic, and it just, I don't know, I think you'd really like it. So just quick recommendation there if you have the screener lying around.
I appreciate that. I'll take a look. I've heard good things about the film, but I have not seen it yet, so I will make sure I check that out.
That's a good one.
Well, I mean, Kevin, I appreciate this. This is great. I love doing this with you. And actually, I'm going to take a break here. We were supposed to, or we are going to talk about Zone of Interest, but I actually think that just with this great conversation, I'm going to split us here and then come back. So make sure that you listen to our next episode, which will be covering Zone of Interest, and we'll just focus in right now on our movie moments. And you know what? Since we're taking a quick break, Kevin, why don't you promote your wares before you go? How can people connect with you?
Yeah. So, I mean, if your listeners kind of remember previous times when I've been on the show, I used to be co-host of the Seeing and Believing podcast. This past year, we drew the curtain on the podcast. We hit episode 400 and decided, that's a nice round number. We're going to call it there. So the podcast is no longer active, although if you go to christandpopculture.com, you can still find our archive there, or on, Apple Podcasts, any sort of podcast catcher. But Seeing and Believing has not gone away. My colleague, Sarah Welch Larson, and I pivoted to print. So now we have a newsletter that you can sign up for, where every week we send out written reviews of films that we've recently seen. So if you go to seeingandbelieving.substack.com, you can sign up for free there, or you can pledge a little something if you feel so inclined. But it's free to subscribe, and you get a weekly newsletter every week from Sarah, me, or both of us, just writing movies about. Sorry. Writing reviews about the movies that we've seen recently. So seeingandbelieving.substack.com is where you can find me there.
I appreciate that, and certainly I've subscribed to Substack. I don't know what you call it on Substack, but I have too, and I appreciate everything that you guys put out. And for you at home, a reminder, you can find us wherever podcasts are available. You can like and subscribe to us on YouTube. Smash that subscribe button. We are on Instagram, and you can find us wherever podcasts are available. And if you go to this podcast page on screenfish.net, you can download Fishing for More, which are small group questions help you get the conversation started where you are. And we will be right back with our next episode, which will focus in on Zone of Interest. So, Kevin, once again, thank you. And for you at home, we started the conversation. This was Screenfish.